Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are very Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better in New York or New Jersey. Go to EdenMemorial.com.
They don't call her Confiscation Kamala for nothing. Don't take it from us.
And I support a mandatory buyback program.
A mandatory buyback program? That means the government forcing you to turn in your firearms. To what lengths would Kamala go? Well, she doesn't even support the individual right to own a firearm.
I'm prepared to take executive action and put in place a ban on the importation of assault weapons into our country.
We get it. Sometimes it's tough to understand what she's talking about. But on the Second Amendment and your rights, Confiscation Kamala has been crystal clear. Her gun control agenda comes straight from that petri dish of bad ideas that is California. She can claim to be a gun owner all she wants, but we all know she's the same anti-gun California radical she's always been. Don't be left defenseless. Defeat Confiscation Kamala. Vote Trump like your life depends on it, because it does. NRA Political Victory Fund paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. NRAPVF.org.
Now, back to the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Here's Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. Let's talk to John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance and co-author of the terrific Breitbart Business Digest, out every day. It is a must-read. John, welcome. I want to talk about your great work on tariffs in just a moment, but with the other data coming out in the economy, it seems to me the Fed is in a pickle right now. They simply could not or cannot keep cutting interest rates. I mean, the Atlanta GDP tracker is, 3.4 or something like that? And, the unemployment rate is eased down. I mean, the Fed's got to cease and desist, for heaven's sakes.
They're absolutely right, Larry. Look, yeah, the Atlanta Fed GDP tracker's up to 3.4. That we had these retail sales numbers come out that were very good. Inventories are going up. This more and more looks like they really blew it by cutting in September. That they really should have waited, at the very least, till they had the data about the month of September. Remember, that's when we got the jobs numbers that were much bigger than expected. Inflation rising again. Now we have retail sales, business inventories. These are all sending the same message, which was that the Fed's hike was premature. The 50 basis point hike was insane. They should not cut in November. I mean, that is absolutely true now. Whether they should cut in December should really depend on what other data we see coming out. But probably they need to stay on hold for at least a couple months so that we can get the data in to see. Because right now, this is data showing what happened before the Fed cut. Remember, the Fed cut in the middle of September. So all of this stronger than expected data is not yet reflective of the Fed cutting. They need to see how that's going to work before they cut again.
You know, your call months ago that they should have waited until after the election was 100% right. For political reasons and economic reasons and inflation reasons. Let's put them all in there. They never should have rushed to this crazy Uber 50 basis point cut to juice the economy for Kamala Harris, which is the way I still see it that way. But, I mean, they're you know, there's got to be some probability. I think we talked about this on the TV show. There's some probability that they're going to have to raise the rate again in the next 3 to 6 months.
I think that's right. They really leapt on just a couple. Remember, we had a big surge of inflation at the beginning of this year. They got a couple soft months of inflation, leapt on it, did a big cut. This, I think, has raised the real possibility that they may have to start raising rates again. And that when that happens, if it happens, it will make this September move look like one of the biggest bungles in Federal Reserve history. And Larry, I think you called it right. If it does come down to that, I think Jerome Powell really needs to think about resigning.
Yeah.
Because he did this political cut in September, totally unnecessary. He tried to masquerade it as something needed because of the economy, and now we see that it was not only premature and supersized, and now looks very political. If they have to reverse it, I think that's the end of it.
And one more thing, he should resign. If Trump wins, he should resign. Trump has a right to have his own Fed chairman. And Trump said in Chicago, I think it was Chicago, John, he was asked about the Fed, and he said, I don't want to dictate. I don't want to force it, but I have a right to weigh in, which I thought was a terrific answer.
Of course he has the right to weigh in. It's not even a real tradition. The media kind of made up this idea that there was a tradition that the president shouldn't ever speak about the Fed, that everybody else can, that Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown can write letters demanding a 75 basis point cut, but somehow the president isn't supposed to. But that's actually has not been true in practice at all. Ronald Reagan actually criticized the Fed very clearly when he thought that Volcker was actually staying too tight for too long when they were confronting inflation, because he was worried that Volcker was going to undermine the growth they were trying to generate through the tax cuts. Everything turned out to be pretty good. There is a good argument, actually, though, that Reagan's pressure on Volcker may have made Volcker back off a little.
Yes, 100%. I'm telling you, I was there, 100%. Yeah. And Reagan appointed, Manley Johnson and Wayne Angel and people like that who were charting commodity prices that were falling. And so they were helpful in that. Now, I want to turn to the tariff issue. Reciprocity is the new free trade, and you're writing Trump's tariff strategy, a new way forward for trade and innovation. And thank you for the shout-outs. But, people, this one will be hard to get people to understand, but that it's unfair trading practices the U.S. has been taken advantage of because our competitors have very high tariffs. And if he does protect, it's not just protection, I think, as I understand what you're writing. It's not just protection. It will bring businesses here. It will bring capital here. It will open up factories and companies here. It will create new jobs here. It's a pro-growth approach to trade.
That's right. Look, a lot of times when people think about protection, think about tariffs, they think about very old school protectionism and protectionism that's been practiced in foreign countries where the real goal was to protect some sort of domestic monopolist who very often had a lot of political influence and wanted to prevent foreign competition. In Chicago, Donald Trump said something really important and very different. He said, we're not trying to prevent competition with American companies. What we're trying to do is say you can come here and compete. You just have to do it with American workers on American soil and American factories. So this is very different. Another way of thinking about it that I've found helps people understand it a little more, particularly people who are sympathetic to our pro-growth message, but maybe skeptical of tariffs, is that we now live in an age where capital is very mobile and you can invest all over the world. So Trump is trying to say, if we put up tariffs in a world of mobile capital, capital will come here. That's very different than the 19th century, where capital was essentially stuck in its own country, and so that you didn't have so that you had to import things rather than encourage domestic manufacturing from companies abroad. I think it's a big change, and I think it's going to change the argument about tariffs probably for a generation.
Very good point.
It's very important.
Let me just read some numbers quickly. We don't have too much time, but one of my former deputies, because the NEC has an international wing, the EU, European Union, average tariff, John, 50% higher than the U.S. China's tariffs are more than twice as high. Brazil's tariffs are 3.5 times as high. India's tariffs are over 5 times as high. So the idea that there's some kind of free trade is a myth. I mean, the World Trade Organization permits this. They don't ever do anything. I think, if anything, they rule against the United States. The point is they're unfair, and we have to do something about it. I mean, that's part of this.
The way this gets framed is that Trump is starting a trade war. The numbers you just laid out tells us that the trade war began long ago.
Yes.
And that we have not been willing to at least fight back. And so when people say that other countries will retaliate, and Trump says, no, they won't, I think he's right. Because the retaliation began before we even started talking about putting tariffs. They already have the tariffs. What we're saying is, okay, we're going to put up tariffs too. If you come to us and you say we'll drop our tariffs, then we have a thing we can talk about. So this is negotiation. It will make global trade freer in the end, while also helping American workers. I think a lot of the so-called free traders actually have been behind the times, and they really aren't talking about how trade is actually conducted in the world. They're talking about a theoretical, idea of how they think it's conducted. Trump is actually going to wind up. The people will be amazed. It'll be written in the history books. Trump will have lowered. It won't be a new age of trade wars. He'll actually have lowered tariffs all over the world.
You're right. Exactly. His whole program of reciprocity, using tariffs to negotiate, is actually a ticket to freer and fairer trade, because they'll have to drop down. They'll have to drop their tariffs. So actually, it's a path to free trade. I thought he summed it up pretty well, John, with this chap Micklethwait from Bloomberg, formerly The Economist in London, in the Chicago Economics Club, when he said, look, I know you believe this stuff, but you've been wrong for 25 years. And, 25 years is just about the time the WTO let China in with China's high tariffs.
That's right. Look, one of the things we'd really hoped, this regime that we set up was almost a system of welfare for the U.S. to try to bring to make the rest of the world richer. And we really hoped that by making China richer, we would make them less authoritarian, less totalitarian. We would free them from the yoke of communism, and it didn't work. That bet was wrong. China got richer, more powerful, but they are still just more totalitarian than they were 20 years ago. And so we need to stop welfare for China by letting them have these extraordinarily high tariffs while we have almost nothing.
Even with the China trade phase one, which I was very involved with, Lighthizer was our captain. They're still twice as high today, their tariffs, as ours. Anyway, John Carney, Breitbart, great work, John, as always. And, folks, you should go get the Breitbart Business Digest. It's put out daily. It's a phenomenal product. John Carney, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk to Trump advisor on the economy, Scott Bessent, who was with Mr. Trump at the Wall Street Journal editorial board meeting, which was written up today at some length by James Taranto. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
This is the Larry Kudlow Show.
Did you know it only takes a moment to start the Lexus ES from your smartwatch? Which is the same amount of time it takes to cement your status as unforgettable. With features like the available 12.3-inch touchscreen multimedia display to the spirited V6 engine, the Lexus ES makes every second count. Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.